Some of the greatest films of all time are the silent films of the early 20th century. While the actors and filmmakers of this era used a variety of techniques to tell stories and to entertain, these films all had one thing in common: they had no recorded sound. Because audiences could not hear characters speak, much of the storytelling was done visually, using text, gags, and pantomime to get the point across.
Still wonderful, isn't it? And no dialogue. We didn't need dialogue. We had faces.
But to say that silent films had no dialogue is a mistake. They were full of dialogue. It just appeared as text on written cards called intertitles, rather than as audible speech. Characters still spoke to each other, we just didn't hear it. Even the silent film greats like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Harold Lloyd had to rely on written dialogue to tell a story and move the plot along. Do you want to respond to that, Buster Keaton?
Passed.
Alright then, moving on. In 1924, however, a film appeared that broke the dependency on dialogue shared by all feature films up to that point. Der letzte Mann, or The Last Laugh in English, directed by F.W. Murnau. According to IMDb, it was the first feature film to have no speech whatsoever, not even in intertitles. And if you don't count documentaries, The Last Laugh was the only feature film with no speech until 28 years later in 1952. Obviously, there's something about words that filmmakers find it hard to get away from.
Words, 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 I'm so sick of words.
The Last Laugh tells the story of a doorman, expertly played by Emil Jannings, who works at a luxurious hotel called the Atlantic. His duties as a doorman provide him with an elaborate uniform, and thanks to his job at the hotel and his manner of dress, he is well respected in his community. But after his age makes him less able to fulfill his post as a doorman, he is dismissed from his job, replaced by a younger man, stripped of his impressive suit, and demoted to the position of washroom attendant. He tries to hide this shame from his family and friends by stealing back the uniform, but when they find out about his demotion, he loses their respect and becomes a laughingstock. He then returns the suit and resigns himself to a life of misery. But just when everything looks most bleak, he becomes suddenly wealthy through an extremely improbable coincidence, and lives out the rest of his life as a millionaire, giving him the last laugh over those who once mocked him. The story is powerful and expertly told. Despite having no dialogue to explain what is happening, the story is always clear because the filmmaking and acting convey far more than words ever could. So now, let's take a look at the 6 ways that Murnau's The Last Laugh tells its story without using dialogue. Number 1. Plot details given visually. The Last Laugh does an excellent job of revealing plot details to the viewer in ways other than having them spoken aloud by characters. For example, we learn that the doorman is aware of his limitations and is wary to lift a heavy trunk by himself because we can see him anxiously trying to signal for someone to come and help him. After no help comes and he is forced to lift the trunk alone, injuring himself in the process, we know that the hotel manager notices because we see him watching disapprovingly and making a note, presumably about the doorman's failure to perform. We know that a wedding is coming up because we see a wedding dress, and the doorman's somber reaction to it makes it clear that the bride is a beloved family member whom he's going to miss. After he loses his job, we see very clearly that his neighbors gossip about and laugh at him, even though we don't know what they're saying. And his family's disappointment is also clear, without them saying a word. Number 2. Physical acting. The lead actor uses physical acting to represent the emotions of his character visually rather than verbally. At the beginning of the film, we see the protagonist standing up straight, moving quickly, walking with certainty, and smiling proudly, all of which communicate the confidence and status that he gets from his job. After he is demoted, however, his posture and appearance change completely. He becomes hunched over, is ashamed to be seen by others, and he moves very slowly. This brilliant acting makes it clear just how devastated our main character is by the loss of his position, and illustrates visually what most films would use dialogue to convey. Number 3. Sets. The sets of the hotel and of the surrounding neighborhood establish a contrast between the grand, luxurious environment in which the man works and the more humble circumstances in which he lives, giving reason to why his status as a doorman might be so important to him and to those around him. This set of the hotel manager's office has window bars that evoke the bars of a prison, making the doorman's perceived lack of freedom as he loses his job visible to the viewer. And the closing doors leading down to the washroom express that he is being shut into his new role and deprived of further opportunity. Number 4. Props. Props also play an important part in The Last Laugh's storytelling. Trunks serve to illustrate the doorman's physical strength, whether showing his imagined super strength in a dream sequence or revealing his actual weakness in the real world. Rags piled onto his hands upon his reassignment to the washroom symbolize the burden of losing his former position of doorman. Even a rug provides a setting for his neighbor to show her earlier respect for his suit as she tries to avoid getting dust on him. Not to mention this well-timed musical cue that has nothing to do with the story. That's great. Anyway, moving on. Number 5. Point of view and subjective shots. The Last Laugh incorporated many unique filming techniques for its time, including point of view shots, in which the viewer sees what the character is seeing, and subjective shots, which take it one step further and attempt to also make the viewer feel what the character is feeling. One example comes when the doorman sees the trunk that later leads to him losing his job. When he looks at it, the camera shows it too, and the viewer is brought into the moment with the protagonist. This happens again when he is trying to win his job back and sees an opportunity in the form of the heavy trunk in the hotel manager's office. During the wedding and the subsequent sequences, the film makes extensive use of subjective shots, which communicate both what the man is seeing and a good idea of what it feels like to be drunk. Just water for me, thanks. Number 6. Editing. Editing is used in The Last Laugh to show what the character on screen is thinking about without him having to express it out loud. After the doorman tries unsuccessfully to prove that he is fit to keep his job, the film cuts from his face to a shot of his replacement working outside, and then back again, to show that he is sadly comparing himself to the younger, fitter man. Later, after he has given up his uniform, we see an inserted shot of his niece's upcoming wedding, expressing his fear of showing up to the event without his formal outfit. Near the end of the film, as he sits alone in the washroom, the film cuts back to his home neighborhood from which he has just been cast out, showing his sadness at the rejection of his friends and family. These 6 techniques used in The Last Laugh are powerful ways to tell a story without using dialogue, and they remain just as effective today as they were in 1924. Even though we now have sound as an additional tool in the filmmaking arsenal, we can learn a lot from this masterpiece of silent filmmaking. So remember, when it comes to telling a memorable and convincing story, silence is golden. I'm Peter C. Davidson. Thanks for watching.